Hi, today we're going to be talking about 5 points you should know regarding estrangement and mental illness. I'm Marie Moore and I'm a therapist and a wellness coach. Let's get started. So mental health issues, including addiction, can profoundly impact relationships, causing distress and sometimes estrangement. So if we're watching someone, it's our adult child or our parent, and they're struggling, we can have a lot of different reactions regarding their struggle. And the way that we feel, the way that we think impacts the relationship. Mental health issues affect many people, and not just one type of person. It could be anyone. It could be all of us. And all of us have had either depression or anxiety. That's worry, right? We all do. And we're going to deal with it during our lives, and other people will deal with it. But one of the things we need to be keen on is stigma. So the first thing we want to talk about is what stigma is. So stigma affects millions of people around the world. It's the way we see what mental illness is. How do we perceive it? Do we judge it? And when a loved one struggles with mental illness, it doesn't just affect them, it affects everyone around them because of the behaviors, but also the way that we perceive it. The stigma surrounding mental health can exacerbate these challenges, and it creates barriers in how we support the people in our family or not support them. On this complicated issue, how do you deal with the fact that somebody wants to cut off? And what happens when they have something, and do they have a mental illness? Well, let's talk about this. At first, we don't know how to talk about it. We feel ashamed and afraid of what others might think. If it's us, we think other people are judging us. If it's our family member, we feel like they are being judged. Maybe we're the ones that are judging them. I mean, that's possible. And it's a common experience. The fear of judgment and rejection can kind of prevent families from seeking the help and support. And support doesn't mean you get fixed. It just means you show up for them. But there is hope, and that's by breaking the silence and fostering open communication about mental health and about being able to talk about and accept how we feel about the other person experiencing different things. And if we can't talk to our loved ones, then we can get help and talk to someone else. I mean, that's a great thing to get support, right? And it's important to remember that mental illness is not a choice. It's a medical condition that requires understanding and compassion. The stigma surrounding mental health can have devastating effects on families, leading to feelings of isolation, shame, and guilt. But by challenging stigma and supporting one another, families can create a safe and nurturing environment where everyone feels valued and understood. And we get to do this. Well, what happens when we haven't done it? Then what? Well, that's when things like cutting off can happen, whether there's mental illness or just people struggling in life in general. Maybe it's the way that you perceive them or they perceive you, but things just aren't jiving. And within this paradigm of stigma is the stigma that very many families have when there's been an estrangement, and how we perceive other people are going to talk about us, okay? So let's say you're an adult child and you want to talk to people about the fact that you can't be in your family right now because of what's going on. This can be really, really tricky because some people are going to judge you. Some people are going to say to you, oh my God, you need to go back. But maybe there are legitimate reasons why being in relationship right now is not a good idea for you. You may have abuse that has gone on, and you need to be safe away from those behaviors from your family. Or maybe you're a parent or a sibling who has had to estrange from someone, and you're being judged for that. And there's a lot of stigma. It's not like when someone dies. I mean, we talk about the concept of ambiguous loss, ambiguous grief, because when you lose a family member to estrangement, whether you're the one who's doing the estrangement or not, what happens is there's no closure. The person's around, but you don't see them, and they don't want to see you, or you can't see them. So there's a lot of like uncertain grief, and we need to process that grief, but it doesn't help if we feel like we're going to be judged. So if you're watching this right now and you're just curious, and maybe you're not estranged from anyone, and you're wondering, how do I support somebody? Just make space for them to be able to share, say what they need to say. And if you fall in that category that you have had to leave a relationship, or someone has left you and you're feeling this loss and this grief, remember, get someone to support you. It's really hard to do this alone. The second thing we need to know is that there's a difference between diagnoses of illnesses, disorders, and symptoms. And there are a lot of armchair experts and casual use of the word narcissist. Oh, you're bipolar, he's bipolar. But you know what? Mental illness is a real thing. And to make it into this sort of casual use of language really does a disservice to the people that do have these diagnoses, because they are struggling. No one chooses this, remember? And so I think we ought to be cautious with the way we use these words and say, well, this person has traits like this, or I'm noticing this about this, instead of already like deeming them to have an illness when they don't. So we need to remember that the causes of mental illness are as diverse as they are intricate. Childhood trauma, whether through abuse or exposure to violence, can plant the seeds of psychological distress. And then there's genetic dispositions, there's chronic illnesses and biological factors, and that further muddies the waters, shaping this landscape of mental health in unpredictable ways. But in this casual use of conversation and language, sometimes we point fingers, and it isn't always straightforward. Some parents, regrettably, have been negligent or abusive or self-centered, and they have contributed to their child's suffering. Yet, it's important to acknowledge that not every parent fits this mold, and we need to make space for that. I think as we converse about the topic of mental health and addictions and estrangement, we need to make space that not every parent has been abusive. And I can already read the comments of all you adult children who are going to scold me for saying that, but I'm going to stick to it because I have met many parents who have been estranged who do not fit the description of abusive. In the aftermath of estrangement, adult children may search for someone to blame, or even before estrangement, they may scrutinize their parents' actions, and they may be lamenting all these missed opportunities to intervene and alleviate their pain. If mental illness runs in the family, or if an external party inflicted childhood trauma, the parent often finds themselves at the receiving end of accusations, and they're branded as the source of their adult child's anguish. So let's land here for a minute. No one is saying that if you have suffered at the hands of your parents abuse, that you don't have a right to do what you need to do in order to feel safe and to heal. But what we are saying is that sometimes that there is a degree of overextending blame on a parent when the case is that there's illness going on, there's something going on within the adult child. And saying that doesn't mean that there isn't a degree of deflection by parents who use mental illness as a way to excuse their behaviors. But we have to see the whole thing, because there's a range of different behaviors on both sides where it doesn't seem to be an adequate explanation that everything is very black and white. And the third thing is family reactions and behaviors to those with symptoms or disorders can impact the relationship. So let's unravel this. How a family worries, the way they treat them, the way they look at them differently, can bring their own behaviors. And maybe these symptoms are exacerbated because the family is looking at them like, oh my God, you are not all right. And rather than getting in it with them and loving them and supporting them in a way that's non-judgmental, They're using that person's illness. They're saying, oh, it's you. You are the problem. And we know that this is considered scapegoating, but we also know that if the person is not scapegoated, let's talk about that. What about if the family is just so worried that they don't know how to read, that they're accepting of everything? Everything to them seems like this person is going to go off the deep end, and it's scary to them. That is not scapegoating. That's a whole different thing. Sometimes the very thing that someone is haunted with, feelings of inadequacy, families mirror. And then there's the alienation, the feeling like you're so different or deficient. And maybe you want to blame people. Maybe they wanted to blame you. You could feel unworthy. So these are human feelings, and wanting to cope by embracing perfectionism. Oh, I have to do all this in order to feel like I'm good enough. Sometimes feeling so deficient, for humans in general, diagnoses or not, can be so troubling, and the system of people in the family may not be reacting in a healthy way. Why? Because of fear, because of anxiety. In these heightened emotions, there could be a lot of fear. What's going to happen next? What are we going to do? Conversations are not being productive. Connection isn't happening, and people continue to be deficient, feeling deficient, maybe scapegoated, maybe they're the black sheep. And I've just given you a scenario of a lot of different pieces because it's a lot of complicated things and feelings and possibilities. And mental health issues, people that are suffering and struggling within the family system, it creates a whole dynamic for everyone. And the fourth thing we need to know is that behaviors typical to humans who are hurting are typical to people who have mental illness. Like what? Like getting aggressive, like lying, maybe being antisocial, maybe having outbursts. What we find with severe mental illness is that these behaviors are to an extreme, and that can be really tough. Things like bipolar disorder with a lot of rage and anger, or personality disorders where there's a lot of differences. I love you, I hate you. These types of things can be really stressful for family members, and it can make it hard to stay into the glue of the family. And with mental illness, and generally people, we can be dysregulated. What does that mean? It's really hard for us to get a hold of our emotions. And there could be outbursts and irritation. And number 5 is mental illness when there is abuse. So childhood maltreatment increases risk for developing psychiatric disorders such as mood and anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress, antisocial personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder, and even alcohol and substance use disorder. And who should bear the burden of blame when it comes to mental illness? So any adult child that has experienced abuse, any human on the planet that has experienced abuse, that was horrible. You didn't deserve that, and I am very sorry that that happened to you. However, there is help that you can get to get a trauma-focused therapist that can help you unravel what's going on for you so that you could move forward. What we need to do is provide a space of safety for our loved ones and for our family wherever we are on the spectrum. Is our family falling to pieces right now because there's mental illness or addictions? Is our loved one in need of support and we don't know how to do it? What do you do in these cases? Well, what you do is you help yourself first. You help yourself by taking care of yourself, by creating boundaries. We work on ourselves first. We get support. We make every possible effort to be around those who love and value us, and we find meaning and purpose in our lives, and we work on compassion and understanding ourselves. We're going to be diving into abuse in the next video, so keep watching. Don't forget, if you haven't already caught up with the rest of the series, do so. There's a playlist. And we'll see you in the next video. And leave me a comment. Tell me what you're thinking and what's going on for you in this mental illness and estrangement dynamic. See you in the next video.